That's just my game.
He once stood at the center of Hollywood, a leading man with the face of a star and the intensity of a method actor. In the 1990s, Val Kilmer was everywhere. Fighter jets, leather jackets, iconic roles that defined a generation. Then, almost without warning, he vanished. The industry whispered about ego and arrogance. But the truth was far darker, behind closed hospital doors. Kilmer was fighting a battle that would cost him the one thing that made him unforgettable, his voice. And even more shocking, the world never truly heard his side of the story. Val Edward Kilmer was born on December 31st, 1959, in Los Angeles, California, into a family that looked stable from the outside, yet quietly carried fractures that would shape him for life. His father was a real estate developer, disciplined and demanding. His mother was artistic, emotionally distant, and eventually gone. When his parents divorced during his childhood, the sense of separation lodged deep inside him, creating an early familiarity with loss and silence. Kilmer grew up in the San Fernando Valley, a place where sunshine and suburban comfort masked emotional isolation. From an early age, he showed an intense inner world. He read obsessively, wrote poetry, and retreated into imagination as a form of protection. Acting was not initially about fame for him. It was about control. On stage, he could decide how emotions entered and exited. He could be seen without being exposed. At just 17, he became the youngest student ever accepted into the Juilliard School's prestigious drama division. To outsiders, this looked like the beginning of a dream. To Kilmer, it was pressure, unrelenting, perfection-driven, and unforgiving. Juilliard demanded emotional excavation, discipline, and vulnerability. He delivered all three, but at a cost. Classmates later described him as brilliant, intense, and difficult to approach. Even then, he was misunderstood, not because he lacked empathy, but because he felt too much. The defining rupture of his early life came in 1977, when his younger brother Wesley drowned in a swimming pool at the age of 15. The tragedy shattered Kilmer's emotional center. Wesley had been creative, sensitive, and close to him. Losing his brother left behind a grief that never fully healed. Years later, Kilmer would admit that the pain never left. It simply learned how to hide. From that moment on, death was no longer abstract. It was personal, sudden, and permanent. This loss altered the way he approached art. His performances grew darker, more obsessive, more internal. He wasn't acting to entertain. He was acting to survive. The seeds of his later intensity, so often misread as arrogance, were planted here, in a childhood shaped by abandonment, discipline, and irreversible grief. And as he stepped closer to the spotlight, carrying wounds no audience could see, the foundation was already laid for both extraordinary brilliance and devastating collapse. When Val Kilmer stepped into Hollywood in the early 1980s, he did not arrive like most aspiring actors. He wasn't chasing visibility. He was chasing precision. Fresh out of Juilliard, he carried himself like a stage-trained purist in an industry driven by speed, image, and compromise. That contrast made him stand out immediately and quietly set him apart. His first major film role came in Top Secret, a parody that demanded comedic timing, musicality, and musical performance. Kilmer surprised everyone. Beneath the absurdity, there was discipline. Beneath the jokes, control. Audiences laughed, but casting directors noticed something else. This young actor could do far more than comedy. That potential became impossible to ignore with Top Gun, cast as the icy, confident fighter pilot Iceman. Kilmer embodied a controlled masculinity that contrasted sharply with Tom Cruise's reckless intensity. He barely smiled, he barely moved, and yet he dominated the screen. In a film built on speed and bravado, Kilmer's restraint became unforgettable. Almost overnight, his face was everywhere, posters, magazines, theaters packed with screaming crowds. But fame arrived faster than comfort. Kilmer resisted the machinery of celebrity. He avoided interviews. He questioned scripts. He challenged directors. To Hollywood executives, this felt like defiance. To Kilmer, it was integrity. He was not interested in repeating himself, nor in becoming a product shaped by studio expectations. Instead, he chased transformation. That instinct led him to one of the most consuming performances of his career in the Doors. Playing Jim Morrison was not an imitation. It was a possession. Kilmer lost himself completely, memorizing every song, every movement, every breath. Even surviving members of the Doors reportedly struggled to distinguish Kilmer's voice from Morrison's. The performance earned critical praise and deepened his reputation as a fearless, obsessive actor. By the mid-1990s, Kilmer had reached the peak many actors never touch. He headlined Batman Forever, one of the biggest commercial releases of its era. He stood shoulder to shoulder with legends in Heat, holding his own in scenes charged with quiet menace and emotional weight. From the outside, this was unstoppable momentum, but behind the success, a fracture was forming. The more powerful his performances became, the more isolated he felt. His commitment was misread as arrogance. His intensity was labeled as difficulty. Hollywood began to admire him from a distance, while slowly closing its doors. And just as Val Kilmer appeared to have everything, fame, talent, legacy, the forces that would dismantle his career were already gathering silently just beyond the spotlight. By the mid-1990s, Val Kilmer had reached a level of visibility that few actors ever experienced. His face was instantly recognizable. His name alone could open a film. To the public, he appeared confident, powerful, untouchable, another Hollywood star riding the momentum of success. But that image was carefully constructed by distance, silence, and misunderstanding. After the commercial triumph of Batman Forever, studios viewed him as a bankable leading man. The media framed him as intense, mysterious, and occasionally uncooperative. What they didn't see was a man already pulling away from the surface of fame. Kilmer rarely played the publicity game. He didn't charm talk show hosts. He didn't sell a polished version of himself. Instead, he let the work speak, and when the work ended, he disappeared. This withdrawal fed a narrative Hollywood understood too well. Rumors spread quickly. He was difficult, stubborn, egotistical. Stories from film sets were reduced to headlines, stripped of context. Few mentioned that Kilmer demanded deeper preparation, more rehearsal, more truth from his roles. Fewer still acknowledged that he was pushing against an industry that valued speed over substance. On screen, however, he remained undeniable. His performances carried a quiet tension, a sense that something was always being held back. In crime dramas, he radiated threat without volume. In blockbusters, he brought gravity to spectacle. Even when surrounded by louder stars, he never disappeared. He didn't compete for attention. He absorbed it. Off-screen, his personal life was unraveling. Relationships became strained under the weight of fame and absence. Marriage did not provide refuge. Fatherhood brought responsibility, but also fear. Fear of repeating cycles of emotional distance he had lived through himself. The man the public saw as cold was, in reality, emotionally overwhelmed. Hollywood, meanwhile, began to lose patience. The industry thrives on predictability, and Kilmer was anything but predictable. Each role demanded something different. Each project took something from him. The gap between who he was and who the world thought he was widened with every passing year. By the end of the decade, the contrast was complete. On the surface, Val Kilmer stood at the height of his powers. Beneath it, the pressure was already cracking his foundation. Fame had given him visibility, but it had also erased nuance. And the moment he could no longer perform at the industry's pace, that same fame would turn away without hesitation. The stage was set. What followed would not be a gradual decline, but a sudden and brutal descent, one that would redefine how the world remembered him. As the 2000s approached, the shift was no longer subtle. Val Kilmer was still working, still acting, still committed, but Hollywood had begun to treat him as a liability rather than an asset. Projects became smaller, roles arrived with conditions. Studios no longer asked what he needed. They asked what he would tolerate. The label had hardened, difficult, and once that word sticks, it rewrites every story that follows. On set, Kilmer's intensity was no longer interpreted as dedication. It was framed as ego. His insistence on rehearsal was described as control. His emotional preparation was reduced to volatility. What the headlines never captured was that Kilmer was acting the same way he always had, The industry around him had changed. Faster schedules, thinner scripts, less patience for actors who ask questions instead of delivering lines. At the same time, his personal life was quietly collapsing. His marriage ended, leaving him to navigate fatherhood while his career destabilized. Friends drifted away. Invitations slowed. The phone rang less often. For an actor whose identity was deeply tied to craft, the silence felt like erasure. This was not a fall from fame. It was a slow exile. Then came the symptoms: persistent throat pain, difficulty swallowing, a voice that no longer felt steady. For years, Kilmer dismissed it, partly out of fear, partly because of faith, raised in Christian Science. He had long believed in spiritual healing over medical intervention. Admitting something was wrong meant confronting not just illness, but mortality. When he finally sought treatment, the diagnosis was devastating: throat cancer. The disease did not arrive dramatically. It crept in quietly, stealing strength and certainty before announcing itself fully. Surgery became unavoidable. The procedures saved his life, but at an unimaginable cost. His vocal cords were damaged. The voice that had carried Shakespeare, Morrison, and cinematic menace was gone. Hospital rooms replaced film sets. Tubes replaced microphones. Communication became effort, frustration, exhaustion. Rare photographs from this period show a man unrecognizable to the public. Thinner, scarred, surrounded by medical equipment, his eyes heavy with a mixture of gratitude and grief. He had survived, but survival came stripped of everything he had built. Hollywood did not wait. Roles vanished completely. Offers stopped. The industry that once profited from his intensity now had no use for his silence. For years, Val Kilmer lived outside the frame, alive, aware, watching the world move on without him. This was not just a health crisis. It was an identity collapse. When your voice is your instrument, losing it is not an injury. It is a disappearance. And for Kilmer, the darkest chapter was still unfolding. After the surgeries, the world became smaller. Everyday actions, speaking, eating, breathing, required calculation and assistance. Conversations slowed to fragments. Silence, once a choice, became a condition. For a man whose career had been built on voice, rhythm, and emotional cadence, this silence was not peaceful. It was suffocating. Kilmer withdrew almost completely from public life. He rarely appeared at events. When he did, cameras lingered uncomfortably on his scars, his breathing apparatus, the physical evidence of what illness had taken from him. The media framed his absence as disappearance, his quiet as irrelevance. Few bothered to ask what it meant to lose not just fame, but the basic ability to communicate. Financial strain followed. Medical bills mounted. Without steady work, stability evaporated. Properties were sold. Projects were abandoned mid-development. The artistic momentum he once commanded no longer existed. Even friends struggled to bridge the gap created by his condition. Conversations required patience, time, stillness. Many people simply moved on. What hurt most was not the physical pain, but the narrative that hardened around him. Hollywood had already decided who Val Kilmer was, a difficult actor who faded away. There was no room in that story for illness, for faith-driven hesitation, for survival at a terrible cost. The complexity of his journey was flattened into gossip and assumptions. At home, his children became anchors. They helped him speak, helped him navigate technology that could translate intention into sound. In moments captured privately, never meant for public consumption, he practiced expressions, gestures, written words. Acting did not leave him. It adapted, but the industry was no longer watching. Years passed this way, quiet, heavy, unforgiving. For most actors, this would have been the end, a final fade into obscurity. But Kilmer never believed his story was finished. Not because he expected a comeback, but because he believed meaning could survive even when recognition did not. And then, unexpectedly, the silence cracked. Not with noise, but with acknowledgement. A single phone call, a single scene, a single chance to be seen, not as he once was, but as he had become. For years, Val Kilmer existed in a space Hollywood rarely acknowledges. A living artist without a voice, present but unseen. The industry did not know how to place him. Casting conversations ended before they began. Insurance concerns, communication barriers, scheduling complications. All the quiet reasons studios used to avoid risk stacked against him. There was no dramatic rejection, just absence. His days settled into a slower rhythm. Medical routines replaced auditions. Writing replaced speaking. When he communicated, it was through screens, text, gestures, and patience. Each interaction required effort from both sides, and that effort filtered people out. Invitations stopped. The circle tightened. Silence became structural. Public perception hardened further. Online, speculation filled the gaps left by facts. Some assumed addiction. Others assumed arrogance. Few understood the reality. Survival had demanded sacrifice, and the price was invisibility. Kilmer did not correct the record. Explaining himself would have required a voice he no longer had. Yet, beneath the quiet, he kept working. He painted, he wrote, he revisited poetry. He documented his life obsessively. Hours of footage, journals, recordings, almost as if he sensed one day the story would need proof. This wasn't nostalgia. It was preservation. If he could no longer speak for himself, the record would. Physically, the strain never fully lifted. Breathing remained labored. Eating was careful. Sleep came unevenly. The body reminded him daily of what had been taken. But psychologically, something steadier began to form. The urgency to be seen faded. In its place grew a quieter resolve, to exist honestly, even if unnoticed. Hollywood, meanwhile, moved on. New faces replaced old legends. The films he once anchored became anniversaries, retrospectives, footnotes. His name surfaced occasionally, usually framed in the past tense. For many, Val Kilmer was already history. Then came a decision that would change everything. A return to a story that had defined him. A role that required almost nothing from his voice and everything from his presence. Not a comeback built on nostalgia, but on truth. The silence was about to mean something again. When Top Gun, Maverick entered production, few expected Val Kilmer to be part of it. The original story had moved on. The industry had moved on. And Kilmer himself no longer fit the conventional requirements of a leading man. But this return was never about convention. It was about acknowledgement. The scene was written with restraint. No grand speeches. No nostalgia-laden monologues. Just two men facing time. When Kilmer appeared on screen as Iceman, the room felt different. His presence carried decades of rivalry, respect, loss. The film did not ask him to be who he once was. It allowed him to be who he had become. His voice, recreated with AI technology using archive recordings, was not a trick. It was a bridge. The words were sparse, deliberate, weighted with meaning. And then silence again. But this time, the silence was honored. The camera lingered on his face, on the effort it took to exist in that moment. The performance did not demand pity. It demanded attention. Audiences felt it instantly. Theaters grew quiet. Viewers cried. Not because a character was dying, but because a human truth was being acknowledged. Here was an actor who had lost his voice, given one last chance to speak. Not loudly, not heroically, but honestly. For Kilmer, the moment was not a victory lap. It was a completion, a full circle. The rivalry that once defined his public image dissolved into something gentler. Mutual respect, shared history, gratitude for survival. The film offered him dignity, not redemption. Presence, not resurrection. Critics called the scene the emotional core of the film. Fans called it unforgettable. And for the first time in years, the world stopped asking why Val Kilmer disappeared. They saw where he had been.